Alrighty, today we're going to discuss absolute value equations. So some vocabulary you're going to need to know is what is an absolute value? Well, the absolute value of a real number x, written as such, is its distance from zero on the number line. So an extraneous solution is a solution derived from an original equation that is not a solution of the original equation. Right, so this means basically you got a solution, but it actually does not work out, so therefore it's not a solution. Alright, so over here we have concept summaries. So we have the symbol, the absolute value of x is equal to a. Well, the definition just means the distance from x to 0 is a units. So as we can see, if x was equal to negative a, then or x is a, then it would still be a numbers away from 0. This is the absolute value of x is less than a. Can also be known as the absolute value of x is less than or equal to a, which is still the distance from x to 0 is less than a units. Right, so it can look like this. Right, and then we also have the greater than, which just means the distance from x to 0 is greater than a units, which again can look just like this. So you see, if it has a less than sign, we're going to be dealing with an and conjuncture, right, where it makes the sandwich. If we have a greater than, we make the or conjecture, which makes the wings. That's definitely a big part to know. If it's just a regular or equal sign, you'll see it just makes two dots. Alright, so absolute value tends to always have at least two solutions. Alright, so it says a definition of absolute value. For any real number x, the absolute value of x is equal to x or negative x if x is greater than or equal to 0 or x is less than 0. The absolute value is the distance from 0. So if you're understanding distance from 0, it's always measured with positive numbers. Alright, so let's look at the first example. So solve an absolute value equation. We're going to solve each equation and graph the solution. So here we have this right here. So the way to work this is because you get two solutions, you need to form two equations. Right? You're going to have the normal equation, which is x minus 6 equals 2. And you're going to have a second equation, which will be x minus 6 equals, and all you have to do is just change the sign. Right, so if it's a 2, it's going to end up being negative 2. Right? So what we're going to do here is just solve. All we have is a constant, which is a negative 6, so we're going to add 6 to both sides. So that's going to give us 2 plus 6, which is 8. Over here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add 6 on both sides. And now we get x is equal to negative 2 plus 6, which is not negative 8. It's not 8 again. If you actually do this in the calculator, you get 4. What you'll see here, if I let this be 4, I get a solid dot here. And if I let this be 8, I get a solid dot here. So on the equal sign, you get just a solid dot on each side. Alright, so let's solve the next one. Again, with absolute value, it means you have two separate equations. The n sign never changes, so it stays negative 5x. The second part, the first equation, the constant on the right side doesn't change. But on the second equation, the constant on the right side changes to a negative. Right? And then you just solve it. So here all I have is a coefficient. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 5. 20 divided by negative 5 ends up being negative 4. Divide by negative 5 here. So I get x is equal to positive 4. So now I'm going to write negative 4 here, it's a solid dot. Write positive 4 here, it gets a solid dot. Alright, let's move on. So if you want to try some of these on your own, you can pause and see what you come up with, and then we can check our answers in a little bit. Alright, so let's see what you got. So again, I'm going to form both equations. So I got 3x plus 2 will equal positive 4, and 3x plus 2 will equal negative 4. And then we're going to solve each equation, right? So now I got to get rid of my constant, so I'm going to subtract 2. So we get 3x is equal to positive 2, and then divide by my coefficient. Right? 2/3 is actually a reduced fraction, so I cannot go any further. Right? And we'll do the same thing over here. We'll subtract 2. Which gives me negative 6. And divide by the coefficient. Which will give me negative 2. Alright, 2/3, if you don't know, is actually 0.667. Or roughly 6 repeating. This is an estimate. Alright, so that would be, so if we, let's see, make negative 2 here, and this would be 0, so 2/3 would be approximately about right here-ish, and of course negative 2 is right here. Alright, alright, so here's the next one. Make your, so before you can actually make your two separate equations, you got to isolate the absolute value equation inside. So what we're basically going to do right now is actually solve for just the absolute value equation. So the way we're going to do this, get rid of our constant first by subtracting 3 on both sides. So we get 2 absolute value of x plus 9 is equal to 7 minus 3, which is 4. Then we'll get rid of the coefficient. We'll divide both parts by 2. So now I get the absolute value of x plus 9 equals 2. Once the absolute value equation is isolated, you can then form your two equations. So the inside didn't change, so it's x plus 9 equals 2. And then you just change the sign of the right number, so it's because x plus 9 equals negative 2. And then solve for each one. So all I got is a constant, so I'm just going to subtract 9. So I get x is equal to negative 7. Subtract 9 over here. And I get x equals negative 11. Alright, so I'm going to roughly say this is negative 11 here. 10, 9, 8, 7. So I'll make this negative 7 here. There you go. Alright, so let's look at some other solutions. Alright, if we take one like this, right? First thing you gotta do is you've got to isolate the absolute value. So I'm actually going to get rid of my coefficient by dividing everything by 3. That will go away, so I'm left with the absolute value of x minus 8. It's going to be equal to x over 3 minus 9 over 3, which is 3. This couldn't actually simplify any further. Alright, so now we're going to use both equations. So now the x minus 8 will equal x over 3 minus 3. And then the second equation will be x minus 8. So everything's going to change its signs. So this is going to become a negative x over 3 plus 3. Okay? So you make that second equation, everything's going to change its signs. Alright, so now the fun begins. So now I'm going to combine my x's. So I'm going to subtract x thirds because that's actually smaller than a whole. That's going to zero out. I'm going to be left with negative 3, negative 8. If you don't know what this is, there is an imaginary 1, so all you got to do in your calculator is just do 1 minus, always use parentheses, 1 divided by 3, which is just 1/3. I get 2/3. So now it is 2/3 x. Right? And now I'm ready to get rid of my constant, so I can now add 8 on both sides. 0's out. -3 plus 8 gives me positive 5. And remember, when we had a fraction earlier, it's just a regular number. So to get rid of this coefficient, I'm just going to divide by 2/3 on both sides. So I get x equals 5 divided by 2/3. So in my calculator, I'll do 5 divided by parentheses 2 divided by 3. And it gives me 15/2. If you do Control Enter, it's roughly 7.5. Alright, so now I'm going to do the same thing over here. This time I'm going to add x3 over. That zeroes out. I'm now left with just a positive 3. If you're not good with the fractions, there's an imaginary 1 there, so I'm just going to do 1 plus, in parentheses, 1 divided by 3. I get 4/3. Now I have 4/3x minus 8. Now I can get rid of my constant, so I'm going to add 8. That zeroes out. I'm left with 4/3x equals 11. And then now I'm going to divide by 4/3 on both sides. On my calculator, I'm going to do 11 divided by, and I'll do parentheses, 4 divided by 3. And in turn, I get 33/4. If I just do Control Enter, that's roughly 8.25. Alright, what we should have been doing in every single one of these is actually plugging it back in to check it. So let's do that now. So let's check these answers. So again, my original equation was 3, absolute value of x minus a equals x minus 9. Alright, so to check this is actually really easy. On my calculator, I'm going to type this in. That's going to be 3. And then I believe if you go to, is Control equal? No, dang it. It is, I think it's this one. Oh, it is. Okay, good. Alright, so you're going to hit this button right here next to the book. And you'll see this icon right here that looks like absolute values. All you gotta do is select that, type in what you see, except instead of an x, I'm going to replace it with the first solution, which was 7.5. It's going to be 7.5 minus 8, and then arrow out of the absolute value equation. Type the equal sign, which is right below the control, and type the second part, but again replacing the x with 7.5, so you do 7.5 minus 9. Now watch what happens when you hit enter. It tells you it is false. So this actually does not work. So this is not a solution. So now let's try this guy. And a trick to doing this, if you just scroll up to the equation you just wrote, make sure it's highlighted, hit enter, it recopies the exact same thing you wrote, and now you can just go back with the arrow keys and delete the first solution. So I'm going to delete 7.5, and I'm going to type my second solution, which was 8.25. Remember there's 2 of them, so I'm going to go all the way over here as well. Do the same thing. And when I hit enter, it says false again. Therefore, both of these are not solutions, so therefore there is no solution to this problem. All right. Let's look at another one. we have 2, the absolute value of x plus 7 equals 12. All right, let's solve it out. So again, I'm going to isolate it. So I'm going to divide by 2 to get rid of that coefficient. So now I got the absolute value of x plus 7 equals 6. Right? And then I can make my 2 equations. So it gives me x plus 7 equals 6 and x plus 7 equals negative 6. And then I'm going to subtract 7 on both sides. Went ahead and just did it across the board. So 6 minus 7 gives me negative 1. And negative 6 minus 7 gives me negative 13. Alright, but let's check it to make sure it actually works. So we're going to try our new concept. And I'm going to just use this one right here. So that's going to be 2. Remember the button next to the book. The second one, or the first one in the second row. And then 7x, I'm going to plug in the number I just got. So it's going to be negative 1 plus 7. Scroll out, hit the equal sign, 12. And see, now it gives me a true statement. So I know that one is definitely a solution. And then you can do the same thing with this guy. So I'm going to scroll up, re-highlight, and since it's negative 13, all I'm going to actually do is add a 3 there, and then hit enter, and it says true as well. So those both work. So that's a quick, easy way to check it since you did all the work by hand already. You don't need to redo the whole problem. All right, let's look at one more. Alright, so now let's form our 2 equations. So I'm going to have 5x minus 2 equals 7x plus 14. And then again, what's inside the absolute value does not change. That's still going to be 5x minus 2 equals. And then we're going to change these signs. So both these positive things are going to become negative 7x minus 14. So now we're ready to solve. Let's get x to one side. Since the 5 is smaller than the 7, I'm actually going to subtract 5x on both sides. Gives me negative 2 equal to 2x plus 14. And now I'm ready to get rid of my constant, so I'm going to subtract 14. Negative 2 minus 14 gives me negative 16. Now I'm ready to get rid of my coefficient. So now I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Negative 16 divided by 2 is negative 8 over x, or equals x. That's our first one. So let's go over here. This time negative 7 is actually smaller than 5, so now I'm going to add 7x to both sides. Alright, so 5x plus 7x gives me 12x minus 2. Now I'm ready to get rid of my coefficient, or constant, sorry, by adding 2. Negative 14 plus 2 gives me negative 12. And now I'm going to divide my coefficient, so I'm going to divide both sides by 12. And that gives me negative 1. Right? Let's check our answers. Again, I'm going to use the original equation. Again, to make the absolute value, you're hitting the button next to the book. Second option on the first option on the second row. There we go. And then 5, but instead of the x, I'm going to type a negative 8. But notice a number next to a letter, remember that indicates multiplication. So when you're plugging in, best practice, use parentheses. So I'm going to put the negative 8 there, get out of the parentheses, minus 2, get out of the absolute value, equal sign below control, and then 7, again, parentheses, negative 8, get out of the parentheses, plus 14. Again, the parentheses, all it's doing is telling, all right, we want to multiply, not subtract. So you have to kind of guide the calculator what you want it to do. When I hit enter, though, I get false. So I see that this does not work out for me. All right, so now I'm going to try the other one, which was negative 1. And again, if I go back and I highlight it, hit enter, I can go everywhere where there's a negative 8, and I can change it to a negative 1. So now that the calculator notices it's a multiplication, you don't have to put parentheses around it no more. You just got to go and change those 8s to 1s, hit enter, and I see it's actually true. So in this situation, I saw one did not work, but the other one did. So you've seen now where they both fail, so that's a no solution. You've seen where they both work, so it had two solutions. And now you've seen one where one failed, but the other one worked, so it has one solution. All right, when you get done taking all these notes, go ahead and watch the second video, and then don't forget to post in the discussion a question or comment about what you've learned.